Welcome, and thank you for joining me in this presentation about JOGNN, the Journal of Obstetric, Gynecologic, and Neonatal Nursing, titled Scholarship for the Care of Women, Childbearing Families, and Newborns, Content and Submission Tips. I'm Patricia McCartney, and I'll be your presenter for this webinar. I'm the Associate Editor for JOGNN, and I've been looking forward to being able to share this information with you about JOGNN. I welcome all of you that are joining me in this webinar, whether you're familiar with JOGNN or learning about JOGNN from North America or international locations. If you are experienced researchers or new researchers, and maybe experienced maternity care clinicians or students, you are all welcome, and we have prepared this webinar for all of you. A bit of housekeeping during the webinar. You can type in your questions in the box, and we will address the questions at the end of the webinar in the Q&A. JOGNN is a journal of the Association of Obstetric, Gynecologic, and Neonatal Nurses, A1. Oh, I'm sorry. Moved ahead too far. Okay. And I'd like to introduce you to the JOGNN editorial team that I have listed here. Our editor-in-chief is Nancy Lowe, associate editor myself, the assistant editor, Oliver Dzadkowic, our senior managing editor, Angela Hartley. We have an editorial advisory board that is appointed by our editor-in-chief. And we have a team of approximately 200 peer reviewers with a wide variety of expertise. And our JOGNN journal production manager at Elsevier is Natasha Cahill. You can go to our website, www.jogn.org, and you will see all of our editorial team fully listed there. I designed this presentation to answer 5 typical questions that both readers and authors ask us about JOGNN. So after the presentation, you should be able to answer these 5 questions. What is the mission of JOGNN? What content can I expect to find on JOGNN? Who reads JOGNN, and who can I reach by publishing my work in JOGNN? Is my work appropriate for JOGNN? And how can I prepare a manuscript for a successful peer review and consideration for publication in JOGNN? Let's begin with the first question. What is the mission of JOGNN? Formally stated, the mission of JOGNN is to advance the health and health care of women, childbearing families, and newborns through the publication of peer-reviewed nursing and interdisciplinary scholarship. I've listed a few aims here to help me better describe JOGNN. As a peer-reviewed journal, the aims of JOGNN are to advance knowledge, research, practice, and policy, to publish scholarly work that informs the discipline and the reader, to share practice implications with scientific and clinical communities. Practice implications are important to JOGNN, and they are expected in our manuscripts. Another aim is to contribute to the scientific and professional literature, and of course, to disseminate work that is of value to our readers. An important question that readers, authors, and librarians ask is, what content can I expect to find in JOGNN? JOGNN certainly has a reputation as a leading research journal on maternity care, but we publish a variety of other articles, and those categories are listed here, including research, reviews, methods, healthcare improvement and evaluation, principles and practice, case reports, critical commentary, letters to the editor, editorials, a regular column on current resources for evidence-based practice, and the A1 position statements and practice briefs when they are first released. Authors ask this question: exactly who is the JOGNN audience? Is this the audience you want to share your information with? I'm proud to tell you that JOGNN has a very wide audience that includes researchers, academicians, and clinicians. JOGNN is an A1 journal and is a member benefit for more than 20,000 members in 50 states and 20 countries. Major academic and clinical institutions subscribe to JOGNN. JOGNN articles are indexed in the major bibliographic databases, including PubMed, Medline, CINAHL, Science Citation Index, PsycInfo, and Scopus. And actually all of the databases that JOGNN is indexed in are listed on the JOGNN website. JOGNN articles can be downloaded from the JOGNN website in the A1 Journals app, from Science Direct, from Clinical Key right at the point of care, and other subscription sites. Access is free online in the developing world through the Who-Henary program. Authors can choose to publish in subscription or open access format, and both A1 and Elsevier provide post-publication promotion on social media. JOGNN publishes 6 issues per year, and last year JOGNN published well over 100 articles with 500,000 downloads. JOGNN will celebrate its 50th anniversary of publication next year in 2021. If your institution does not have a subscription, you can request institutional access to JOGNN. To do this, complete a request form with your institution's information and submit it to Elsevier. You can use the link here on the slide, or you can find this form on the webinar registration site. And then Elsevier will follow up with your librarian to discuss options for adding JOGNN to your institution's collection. Authors want to know, is my work appropriate for JOGNN? This is an important question because we will need to reject manuscripts that aren't appropriate for JOGNN. So you need to ask, does your manuscript fulfill the mission of JOGNN? Does your work make a significant contribution to the existing literature? Does it add something new? Refer to the JOGNN author guidelines to consider the various article categories and criteria for submission. The JOGNN author guidelines outline each of the article categories that I listed in the previous slide with the details that are expected for submission. I will refer to the JOGNN author guidelines frequently, and you need to go there and print these. It's a 3-page PDF, and have it next to you as you're preparing a manuscript because a lot of the questions are answered in the author guidelines. You can certainly email a query letter to the editor if you're not sure if your manuscript meets the mission. We are eager to communicate with our authors, so send us an email. And you need to recognize that an academic paper is different than a peer-reviewed journal article. They have different audiences. The purpose of an academic paper, whether it's a PhD, dissertation, DNP project, or course paper, is to document an individual's knowledge and skills for a faculty audience, whereas the purpose of a peer-reviewed journal article is the value for a reader audience. One useful way to determine if your work is appropriate for JOGNN is to go to the website. Explore the website, www.jogn.org. Look at the articles, look at the table of contents, look at the resources for social media, scan to the bottom of the website, and you will see an article that has won the annual Best of JOGNN Award. So spend some time looking around to get a feel for the journal. You can also explore the current issue of JOGNN that's attached to the webinar registration site. So take advantage of that. I'd like to take a moment here to focus on one particular category of JOGNN articles, the healthcare improvement and evaluation articles. I'm the associate editor responsible for these manuscripts, and I'm pleased to support the publication of valuable work by our clinical colleagues. So what is this category? What are the expectations? What are we looking for? These articles include a report on clinical projects to improve outcomes, including quality improvement, evidence-based practice, and program evaluation. The articles should report on a sound clinical project that includes a specific aim to improve a clinical outcome, an intervention, practice change protocol, or clinical practice guideline that was implemented for all patients and providers in the setting, an authentic practice change that is expected to be sustainable. The project should include a description of the intervention with sufficient detail to enable a reader to replicate it. And the project should have sound measurement tools and sound measurement methods and include both process and clinical outcomes. The project should have practice implications beyond the study site. JOGNN requires that all healthcare improvement and evaluation manuscripts are formatted with the International Interdisciplinary Squire Reporting Guidelines, or the Standards for Quality Improvement Reporting Excellence. And I'll tell you more about the Squire Guidelines later in the webinar. JOGNN expects healthcare improvement and evaluation manuscript projects to include both process and clinical outcomes. So simply stated, the process outcomes are about the care and the clinical outcomes are about the results of the care. Process outcomes ask the questions, did the clinicians make the change in practice? Was the protocol carried out as intended? Was the protocol carried out consistently? Process outcomes measure feasibility, use, compliance, or uptake of the practice change. And the data used for process outcomes can include rate of use, compliance, audits, documentation. We do caution use of self-report measures of behavior as they are more subjective and biased measures of practice change. The clinical outcomes measure the result of the practice change and answer these questions. Were the aims for improvement in clinical outcomes achieved? Was there improvement in quality, safety, patient experience, or cost containment? Clinical outcomes might be your regulatory measures, your institutional benchmarks, or other metrics or indicators. Or you might use standard quality measures that have been developed by professional organizations such as the National Quality Forum or the Joint Commission. So this last question is an important one that many authors ask. And it is important because we need to reject manuscripts that are not appropriately prepared. So I've listed a few submission tips here, and I'll talk about these for the remainder of the webinar. Carefully follow the JOGNN author guidelines. Again, print them out and have them next to you. Follow the publication manual of the American Psychological Association, which we usually refer to as the APA manual. There's a new edition this year, the 7th edition, and that is what JOGNN is following. Carefully follow any required reporting guidelines that are asked for in the author guidelines, and I'll talk about required reporting guidelines in a minute. The writing must meet scholarly standards for publication. We encourage you to seek feedback on your manuscript before you submit it to the journal. So have a colleague with experience in publication read through your manuscript and give you feedback. Authors need to recognize that an academic paper will need to be rewritten to fit the author guidelines. Helpful resources can be found in the author guidelines on Editorial Manager, our submission site, and I'll talk about that in a minute, and in the JOGNN references that we've listed at the end of this presentation. One of the references at the end of the presentation is how to submit a publishable manuscript. So take some time to read through that. And in the future, we have plans to have an Elsevier JOGNN webinar specifically on writing for publication. Remember that an accurately prepared paper reflects the credibility of your work. JOGNN expects manuscripts to be prepared in APA format. Now, we usually think of APA format when we're making a reference list, but we need to remember that APA style is not just for the reference list. So I've listed a few of the elements of style here that we sometimes have to do revisions with. So if you go to the APA manual, you'll find some help on all of these things. How to write an effective title, how to prepare the running head, what is the order of pages from title to abstract to text, references, tables, and figures, what is the heading format. The order of pages and the heading format will help you a lot with the structure of your paper. How to cite within the text, how to correctly create a list within the text, and the 7th edition manual chapter on publication has a new section on how to reformat a student paper. APA style uses active voice and first person. We get a lot of questions from authors about this because a lot of us were once taught not to use the first person. So I have a very quick example. A passive sentence is the protocol was developed by the stakeholder team. An active sentence is the stakeholder team developed the protocol. And a first person active is we developed the protocol. So look in the manual for more explanation and examples of that. The new manual has a separate chapter on bias-free language. And of course, our favorite challenges are there: sentences, grammar, and punctuation. There's a table on appropriate abbreviations. The manual includes how to report numbers and statistics and checklists to help you with your tables and figures. You can access some of the APA style on the website, but the most complete resource is the manual. And I have to add that those on the editorial team have a dog-eared copy of the APA manual on their desk. So we all use it for a resource. So along with the APA style, JOGNN has an editorial style and word choice. And these are to avoid clinical shortcut expressions, use acronyms and abbreviations sparingly, and when you do use them, follow the APA style. Use the term women rather than patients, primiparous or mothers. Use the term birth rather than delivery, such as vaginal birth, cesarean birth. Use the term maternity care rather than obstetric care. Use the term women's health care rather than gynecologic care. Use the term newborns or neonates until 28 days of age. And after that point, use the term infant. Use Black women, not blacks. And use person-first language. Women with diabetes rather than diabetic women. Women in the postpartum period rather than postpartum women. And the new APA manual has, again, the separate chapter on bias-free language. You can find more detail on the JOGNN editorial style and word choice in the editorial Words Matter that's on the reference list at the end of the webinar. JOGNN requires authors to use standard reporting guidelines to prepare the manuscript. And those which reporting guidelines you need to use are listed in the author guidelines. Reporting guidelines depend upon the study type, and they really help guide the author to prepare the appropriate content and structure for that study type. So the guideline site listed at the top of this list, the Equator Network, is actually a website that includes dozens and dozens of guidelines, including the 9 listed here below. You might be most familiar with the Consort guidelines that are used for reporting clinical trials, or the PRISMA guidelines that are used for reporting systematic reviews and meta-analyses. I am going to take some time here to focus on the Squire guidelines, Standards for Quality Improvement, Reporting Excellence, because those are the ones that are used for healthcare improvement and evaluation articles in JOGNN. This anatomy of a manuscript is a comparison of the headings used in a research manuscript on the left and Squire guidelines on the right. You probably recognize the 4 major headings in the research format: introduction, methods, results, and discussion. Those same major headings are used in the Squire guidelines, but what differs is the subheadings. The Squire subheadings outline the specific elements of the Squire format that are tailored to clinical projects. So as you prepare a manuscript with the Squire guidelines and you follow the subheading elements, you find that they drive you to be complete with the details that you need for reporting a clinical project. We've created some resources to help authors prepare manuscripts in Squire format. So on the left is a table, Reporting of Clinical Projects, that outlines the Squire elements for the 3 types of manuscripts: quality improvement, evidence-based practice, and program evaluation. There's a column for each that specifies the subheadings and how they should be answered. You can find this table on the JOGNN Editorial Manager website or through the link on this slide. On the right is a collection of published articles in Squire format, published in JOGNN that is, that you can use as examples. And you can find these on the JOGNN website under collections or through the link on this slide. I'd like to add that we recently added a quality improvement article to this collection that's a great example for you to look at. And that article is the use of an early onset sepsis calculator to decrease unnecessary NICU admissions and increase exclusive breastfeeding. So check out that article and look for more to be added there. Maybe yours will be added there. You can also find more detail on reporting clinical projects in the editorial, Reporting Clinical Projects to Improve Outcomes, on the reference list at the end of the webinar. This is the online portal for JOGNN manuscript submission, Editorial Manager, that I've mentioned a few times. On the green taskbar in the middle of the screen at the very far left, you click on there for instructions for authors, and you can find the author guidelines and lots of other resources to help you prepare your manuscript. The instructions for authors also includes links to the reporting guidelines for study types that I listed in a previous slide. So you can go there to access those study types and prepare your manuscript. Editorial Manager also has a guide for how to actually use the website to submit your manuscript. You can explore this resource by using the link on the slide or the link on the webinar registration site titled Resources for Authors. I'll conclude with a summary of the road to manuscript travels in JOGNN, from submission to peer review to publication. A query letter is welcome but not required. The author submits the manuscript on the JOGNN Editorial Manager website. The editor then reads the manuscript and makes a decision to send the manuscript for peer review or to reject the manuscript without peer review. Whenever a manuscript is rejected from JOGNN, the editor does explain the reason for the rejection in the letter to the author. And it's important to note that each manuscript is considered solely on the merit of the manuscript, not on the author credentials and not on the country of origin. You should also know that if a manuscript goes to peer review, that means we're interested in it and we want to work on it. JOGNN uses the double-blind peer review, which means that the author and the reviewer are anonymous to each other. So these reviewers will read the manuscript carefully and make suggestions. Our reviewers are volunteers who have other job responsibilities, so we give them a couple weeks to do these reviews. They send their review back to the editor, who then makes a decision to accept, revise, or reject. Honestly, very rarely is a manuscript accepted without a revision, so you can pretty much expect revisions. And typically a manuscript will go through 1 to 3 or 4 rounds of revisions. But bear in mind, this revision process is actually a really important time because it's when the editor and the author work together to make the best manuscript. That's the goal. When revisions are satisfactory, acceptance follows, and then the page proofs, where the manuscript's prepared in the typeset of the journal, then on to online publication, and then on to the print publication. The timeline from author submission to first decision is on average 6 weeks. The timeline from acceptance to online publication is on average 4 weeks. You can learn more about preparing your manuscript with the new APA manual and these JOGNN editorial resources. I'll add that JOGNN editorials are freely available online without a subscription, so do take advantage of this opportunity and read through these resources. I'm grateful to have had this opportunity to answer these 5 common questions that readers and authors ask about our content and submission. We hope you'll consider JOGNN to advance your practice and to submit your work. So I'd like to thank you for joining the webinar and thank Elsevier production team for supporting the development of the webinar. And I will now go to answer some of the online questions we've received. The questions come up in a box on my screen, so I will read them and answer. And we will follow up with any questions that we can't get to during the webinar. And we do invite any future viewers to email us with their questions. Thank you. Okay, the first question is, at what point in an academic career can I become an editor? I just earned my PhD this past September, and I'm currently working on finding a postdoc. Generally, authors begin by being a reviewer. Our reviewers are all published authors. And the editorial advisory board is usually selects people who have been reviewers for JOGNN, so spent some time with the journal. So you need to have publication, some experience reviewing, and experience on an editorial advisory board. Okay, that question is gone. It's expected to include a letter to the editor, and should I specify editors that may be appropriate? Okay, I think this person is asking, who does their letter go to? All of our letters go to the JOGNN editorial email. And they go to the editor-in-chief and the senior managing editor, and they are dispatched from there to who is going to handle that category of paper. All of the editors were listed on my introductory slide. so you don't need to specify a particular editor. What are some ways an author can help promote their paper? Social media. Work with the team at A1 and the team at Elsevier. They have lots of ways to get your publication promoted. I'd welcome any advice on the manuscript page limitations. It looks like this question is. It's challenging to be succinct, but still cover all the necessary elements and discuss research results. We do have a page limit at JOGNN. Most articles are 15 to 18 pages. It is important to be concise. This is where your peer review at your setting might be helpful. Have a colleague with publishing experience go through your manuscript and see what points can be eliminated or condensed. This question is how to approach an editor during a conference, and do editors like it? Certainly, editors always want to speak with potential authors, so definitely take advantage of an opportunity that you might have to talk with an editor. Since English is not our first language, when an editor sees grammar errors, does he or she reject the manuscript right away, or do they give the author the chance to correct it? We do ask authors where English is a second language to have their manuscripts professionally edited before submission. We have a link on our author guidelines for support. That support is actually through Elsevier, and they will help you with English editing. So we do expect the paper to come in with some English editing. If we can't send it for review because of that, we will return it and explain that you need to rewrite it and resubmit it with editing for English language. Good question. In pre-submission inquiries, what and all things should authors communicate? This question refers to the query letters, I believe, where you're welcome to send a query. It's not required. But in a query letter, you can explain what your topic is, and very important, explain why you think that topic is important for the JOGNN audience. And you can give a brief overview of what your topic is. And the JOGNN editors will be very glad to get back to you and let you know if it sounds appropriate. Would you tell us briefly about causes of fast rejection? I think this fast rejection is referring to the editorial reject or reject without peer review. And that means that the manuscript, the editor reads the manuscript and feels it really is not a fit for JOGNN and makes that decision, and it doesn't really need to go to peer review. Usually it's because it's not a fit for the journal. Sometimes it's because the manuscript was not appropriately prepared. If there's disregard for the JOGNN author guidelines, we will reject it without a peer review. How much time does it usually take for editors to send the review? As I said, the first decision, from submission to the first decision, is usually 6 weeks. How many times can an author resubmit a manuscript? If an author resubmits, they need to rewrite a new manuscript, so they actually can't resubmit the same manuscript. Here's an important question. Is a paper allowed to be published in multiple journals? No. And there is information on our author guidelines about that, regarding whether you've presented the paper or if you've submitted it for consideration for other publications, what the actions are there. These questions are how to make an interesting title and how many suggested words for the title. That is all in the APA manual. It's about 15 words. And the title should describe what is in the manuscript. I'm hoping to publish a report of a qualitative systematic review I completed. The systematic review was around the experience of transgender men in seeking gynecologic obstetric health care. The focus on women's health care was identified as a potential issue for why trans men do not seek GYN care. With JOGNN's focus on using the terminology women's health care, will it negate my ability to publish in JOGNN? No. I encourage you to read the editorial on Words Matter and to read the chapter in the APA manual. And we have certainly published work on transgender experiences. If I do not agree with reviewer comments and suggestions, how should I respond? When you receive your revisions, your comments that you need to respond to in your revisions, you need to make a table with each suggestion and respond to each suggestion. So if it is a suggestion that you don't agree with, you just explain to the editors why you don't agree with that. Do you accept articles from authors who are not affiliated with any medical institute? Certainly, we have authors from all types of institutions and locations. I have a question. If you would be considering a paper on the psychometric properties of a questionnaire that measures stress levels among pregnant women related to the COVID-19 pandemic. This paper is currently in process, and I plan to have a sample size of 200 pregnant women. Thank you. Yes, we have a section for methods. So a sound psychometric measure would be appropriate in our methods section. How do you choose peer reviewers? Our peer reviewers are published authors, and they're selected based on their experience by the editor-in-chief. But if you would like to become a reviewer, you can email us to pursue that. Are there any manuscript processing charges? No, there are no charges to submit. The only fee that might occur is if you choose to publish in open access. And those open access fees are fully transparent, and they are on a link in our JOGNN author guidelines and on a link on Editorial Manager on the website for submission. You can get them there. What would be the advantages of academics requiring students to structure their academic papers similar to JOGNN guidelines? This might be an assignment that a faculty member would want to use with students. I think that the faculty member would need to clarify the purposes of an academic paper and the purposes of a peer-reviewed journal paper. For example, the Squire guidelines were written for reporting a clinical project, but the structure is very complete and there's no reason why it couldn't be used to teach people how to create a complete clinical project. If a study was presented at a national conference, should that be disclosed in a cover letter? Yes, and that is outlined in the author guidelines. If a manuscript was submitted and reviewed and rejected by JOGNN, can the manuscript be rewritten and submitted to JOGNN as a new submission? If the JOGNN editors feel that there is some value in the manuscript for the JOGNN audience, we would tell you to rewrite it in a new paper and submit it. But all papers that are rejected are not necessarily appropriate to be rewritten and resubmitted again to JOGNN. So it really depends on what the editor has explained to you in their letter for the reason for rejection. To publish qualitative study articles, are there any specifications? Yes, there are some reporting guidelines that you can use, and that's outlined in the author guidelines. Will JOGNN accept pilot studies or studies with smaller samples that address an important topic? If yes, what tips can you share? That's a great question, and I'm glad you asked it because we have an editorial on that last page of the webinar about what is a pilot study. Often authors misinterpret what a pilot study is, so do take some time to read through that article. I have a question here. Which reference style do you use? And that is APA. So maybe this question was entered before I got to the APA slide. Would a manuscript about methods used to successfully engage pregnant women who are hard to reach fit JOGNN criteria? If it's a methods paper, you would need to look at the author guidelines for the criteria for a methods paper. If it's a project, look at the healthcare improvement and evaluation criteria. If it's a research study, look at the criteria for a research study. Some of these questions have been answered. If I send my manuscript to editors for pre-review, what is the result I will receive? We don't do a pre-review. When you submit your manuscript, the editor reads the full manuscript and makes a decision. We would encourage your pre-review to be done in your setting. Find a colleague with publishing experience, or 2 or 3, and have them read your manuscript and give you pre-review. In some settings, Research Ethics Board approval is not required for quality improvement projects. Does JOGNN always require IRB approval for healthcare improvement and evaluation manuscripts? This is a good question because a lot of clinical institutions are struggling to make it clear which projects need IRB approval and which don't. And some institutions have. I'm running out of time. I am not sure. I'm hearing it out of time. Okay, I'm going to continue. So you need to state that you have justified why your manuscript does not require IRB approval. You may have a process that outlines specific criteria, and if your project meets that criteria, such as a change for all in the environment, it does not, and it was quality improvement, it does not need review. I'm sorry about that interruption. I don't know what that was. I'm looking for new questions here. Some of these are similar. Here's a question. Do you publish research which was done several years ago? No, the data should be recent. These are very similar questions. I'm sorry for the pause. I think we have gone to 45 minutes. So because these questions seem to be repeating, I think I'll finish here, and I thank you again for joining the webinar. Any questions that we could not get to will be followed up. Thank you.